Okay, let's look now at the changing competitive environment. Now remember that markets could either be very competitive, lots of competitors, many businesses competing, or they can be uncompetitive with few competitors so that firms can largely act without worrying about what the rivals are doing. Now when a market changes, it can either change very slowly, bit by bit, so firms have got time to react, or that change can be sudden. An example of incremental change is the grocery store market. So we've got here the data showing market shares between 2012 and 2019. There's been a little bit of movement. Lidl and Aldi have grown a bit. The big four have shrunk a bit, but broadly speaking, it hasn't changed. Now, one potential disruptive change to that market is where Amazon are trying to move into it. One where you can make your own mind up as to whether it's incremental or disruptive is the UK newspaper market. You can see the market's in decline. The big titles like The Sun have fallen over 18 years from 3.5 million down to about 1.2 million. There's been a smaller decline for the Mail, but generally speaking, we're looking at a downwards move. The Independent went out of business in 2016. The reason why I'm not sure whether that's incremental or disruptive, I personally would call it incremental, is that the newspapers have had time to adjust. So you've looked at, say, the growth of online services. A number of the titles have gone behind paywalls, like the Times. A number have gone for voluntary subscriptions, like the Guardian. Others have built up their online advertising. So there has been time for them to adjust there. A good example of a disruptive market is the still camera market. Go back to 1997. In America, virtually all cameras sold were of the film type. In other words, the cameras where you loaded up a film into the camera, took some pictures, and then sent that film off for developing. By 2007, the film market has been virtually eliminated. The company that was associated with cameras was Kodak, been around for well over 100 years. By 1976, they had 90% of that market. They actually invented the digital camera. Their problem was they didn't really understand what they'd invented. By 2012, they'd filed for bankruptcy. Now, they didn't actually go bankrupt, but they're nothing like the company that they once were. That's only the first part of the story. How many of you use cameras to take photos now? No, you're going to be using your smartphones. And you can see there, by 2010, there are 121 million cameras sold. 8 years later, there were only 19 million. So in the space of that 23 years, we've seen the rise and fall of a complete market. If we now take a look at Uber's impact on the taxi market. Uber were formed in 2012. They're not particularly a profit-making company. In fact, in 2019, they made a loss of $8.5 billion. They operate in a growing market. You can see there the number of taxis have grown, but many of those taxis are now subcontracted to Uber. Now, as far as Uber are concerned, they don't employ the taxi drivers. The taxi drivers are self-employed, and Uber simply contract them. Now, there are many pluses to Uber. If there weren't, then we wouldn't use them. They are incredibly innovative, and that therefore forces their rivals to behave also in an innovative fashion. But now let's look at some of the concerns that people have about Uber. They give misleading information to drivers. So drivers are told that they can earn X amount of money, when in practice they can earn a lot less than that. As I say, the drivers are self-employed, which means that Uber can avoid things like minimum pay legislation, and they can avoid giving them paid holidays, some of the things that we looked at on the legal factors videos. As a result of that, they've actually had their license revoked to operate in London. They're taking that through the courts at the moment. They employ surge pricing to charge a lot of money at peak times. Again, other minicab firms would have done that anyway. You're looking at things like sexual harassment allegations. They don't particularly check their drivers, and there are safety concerns generally. They're also a tax avoider. They use quite heavy tax avoiding techniques to make sure that they don't pay tax which provides money for the upkeep of the roads that they actually use. Now, a market that's going through change as we speak, the video streaming market. There's one company associated with video streaming, and that is Netflix. You can see they were formed in 1997. They've got over 180 million paid subscribers. And if you look at that graph there, you can see that they are a legal monopoly. They have over half of the US streaming market. Their model is, well, partially they license from other providers. For example, Sony, CBS, the BBC, Disney. Now have a look at the titles that Disney brings with it. Animation, Ice Age, Frozen, the old ones like Cinderella, live action remakes, Maleficent, Jungle Book, Marvel, the X-Men, Avengers, Spider-Man franchises, Pixar, the Incredibles and Toy Story franchise, Lucasfilm, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, amongst others, and they've recently acquired 21st Century Fox. So these are companies that are currently suppliers to Netflix. They also invest heavily in their own content. For example, The Crown is a really good example of a series produced by Netflix. But this is a market that's in change. A number of their suppliers are becoming competitors. In other words, in the future, they aren't going to be supplying films and TV programs to their rivals. The biggest example is Disney Plus. Now that launched in November 2019. And by April 2020, it already had 50 million subscribers. During the coronavirus lockdown, lots of people have been subscribing to video streaming services. However, Disney are themselves in trouble because during the shutdown, their parks have closed as well, and they've had to borrow $6 billion to try to deal with the problems that they've got. Another supplier becoming a competitor is BritBox. BritBox is BBC and ITV launched in 2017. They've got 1 million subscribers, but they're trying to build themselves globally at the moment. There are also other big or potentially big players. Also, in November 2019, Apple TV Plus launched, exactly the same time as Disney Plus launched. Then haven't been particularly successful at the moment. They've only got 10 million subscribers, but that may grow. And last but definitely not least, Amazon Prime Video. They've got 150 million subscribers, so they are already a major competitor to Netflix. So we're looking there at a market that is rapidly changing. I've got no idea where that's going to finish up in 4 or 5 years' time.